Welcome to the DNA of Things, where we explore the intersection of DNA, fitness, and human performance to unlock your true potential. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Koenig. Today, very special guest, really excited to speak with him, Dr. Dimitri Koutsoubakis, CEO and founder of WellFit, a pioneering fitness and wellness company in the UAE. Dr. Koutsoubakis' journey from academia and corporate leadership to creating a fitness empire is both inspiring and instructive. Dr. Koutsoubakis has a rich background, very diverse background. He spent 17 years in the UK working with major companies like Lenovo and Microsoft, and held academic positions at the University of London and the University of Dubai. His expertise spans from business strategy, statistics, and martial arts, making him a unique leader in the fitness industry. Dr. Koutsoubakis has worked with prominent figures and organizations, turning WellFit into a cutting-edge fitness and wellness hub in Dubai. In this episode, we delve into Dr. Koutsoubakis' fascinating background from his beginnings in Rhodesia to becoming a leading figure in the fitness industry. We discuss the genesis of WellFit, the importance of integrating wellness and fitness, and the innovative ways WellFit is helping people achieve their health goals. You'll learn about the significance of understanding your body's unique needs, the role of data in optimizing fitness, and how to turn fitness into a lifelong, enjoyable journey. Stay tuned to discover how WellFit is changing the game in fitness and why this matters to you, your health, and your longevity. Let us dive in. Dr. Dimitri Koutsoubakis, thank you so much for joining me. Your reputation precedes you. So a number of massive accomplishments in your lifestyle, diverse career spanning, Lenovo, Microsoft. You've had academic positions in London, the University of Dubai, a martial arts background, CrossFit background, and now you're leading this empire, CEO, WellFit. And I'm sure, we're just getting to know each other. There's a lot more a mystery behind the man, and that's really what this podcast is about. Initially, is to learn more about this international man of mystery behind the mission of WellFit. So please tell me, why don't we just start with the genesis of WellFit? How did you get from this potential career in science to leading UAE's emerging gym brand?
Okay, first of all, I'm honored to be with you here today, Jeremy. So many thanks for the kind intro and the kind words. And let me get into it. So the mystery behind the man, it mystifies me sometimes. It's so convoluted and cosmically strange how I'm here today that I have to tell you the story going back a stage before the days of WellFit and acknowledge something. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing here today if it weren't for the serendipity of being based in Dubai these past 15 years. Dubai is a place that very frequently attaches ideas to the capital that could springboard those ideas. It's a common feature. You'll find some guy who has an idea or a skill set and accidentally / serendipitously stumbles against some other guy or a group of guys who've got money that wants to be engaged, doing something productive. And the two meet and they say, hey, wouldn't it be a great idea if ... So my story in fitness generally, as an entrepreneur, begins in my previous endeavor, Fit Republic. Now, this is an enterprise going back to 2014, 2015. And let me tell you that strange little story. So I want you to imagine that back in the day, in 2014, I was working for Microsoft, and I was a relatively senior executive in Microsoft, UAE, and I had a plan. The plan was something like this. Since my wife happens to be American, plan was live in Dubai for a few years, working for Microsoft, do what executives do, which is climb up that corporate ladder. And then Seattle was in my sights. My next move would have been moved to the United States, right? Me, my wife, my 3 kids. That's the plan. And then in the meantime, just to give you some context, what's known about me among my peers in Microsoft is I'm the nutcase who's always carrying, a gi, like I've got a jiu-jitsu gi with me, or I've got gloves, or or I come in with a black eye, or I'm limping a little bit, and hey, what happened, Dimitri? And I injured myself over the weekend. So what my colleagues know about me is a couple of things which are interesting. One, I seem to be always going off to some kind of gym. And they know that I'm into this new CrossFit thing. So they can see calluses on my hands, and and I tell them all about my most recent deadlifting injury, my lower back. And they know that I'm into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'm into Thai boxing, I'm into CrossFit and powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting and all that stuff. So that's what's known about me, on the one hand. On the other hand, courtesy of my past, my academic past, it's known that I used to be a business professor, and I'm a trained statistician. So statistics and math is my academic background. So, I've taught on MBA programs for about almost 20 years at this stage. So I know about business models and business plans and feasibility studies and all that. So keep those two facts about me as a context. This guy used to be a business professor, probably knows how to design a business model, right? Number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, this guy lives inside a gym. He's always in the gym somewhere as a hobby. So one day, I kid you not, I arrived at work, and I was, from out of a blue sky, asked, would I be interested in participating in a venture capital-driven opportunity for a large-scale fitness facility based in the UAE? And this, by the way, Jeremy, because sometimes the universe amazes us how strange it is. This was ultimately motivated by a couple of guys having a beer, watching the CrossFit Games. Remember, the CrossFit Games used to be a big thing, right?
Yeah.
So these guys are watching Rich Froning or someone, being a complete animal on the screen. They're watching the CrossFit Games, having a couple of beers, and it occurs to them, hey, you know what? There's nothing like that in Dubai. Wouldn't it be cool if we did something like this in Dubai? And then immediately they said, hey, what about that Greek friend of yours? What's his name? That Dimitri character. He does CrossFit, doesn't he? Let's talk to him. I kid you not, this is what happened. A few months down the line, I find myself announcing to my wife that, honey, brace yourself. I'm going to resign from Microsoft. I have 3 kids at this point, right? So I'm not crazy. I'm going to resign from Microsoft. I'm being given this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I'm going to get equity. This is my one chance to get some equity, do something on my own. And I'm going to take a plunge. I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to try to do something big. My wife sort of did think I was slightly crazy, but bless her, she went with it. She said, do it. I trust you. And I did. I ended up resigning from Microsoft. I got stuck into a beautiful plan that started small. I remember it started as a $1 million kind of thing, and it ended up becoming a $12.5 million kind of thing. It became big. I'm not at liberty to share names and precise details right now, but bear with me when I say this, that we ended up doing something that it's a going concern to the very day, and it did brilliantly because it wasn't a gym. So I had an epiphany, Jeremy, as I started designing this business and getting to grips with it. I was playing around in the early days with my initial Excel models, trying to make this thing work on paper or work on Excel. And remember that the initial idea was large-scale CrossFit. So the idea was CrossFit, okay? And as I was playing with my Excel models, I just couldn't make this thing work. It just wasn't generating enough revenue per square foot. It wasn't generating enough EBITDA, enough profit per square foot. It just wasn't working. So I really got mathematically intrigued, like, why isn't this thing delivering? And I had an epiphany, which was, why don't you take all the component parts of CrossFit and disaggregate them? Tell you what I mean. Why don't you have gymnastics, athletics, swimming, martial arts, all the component parts? Think Olympic Games. Like most people, when you tell them Olympic Games, they're thinking of the biggies. Like when I think Olympic Games, I think, first of all, your old passion, Jeremy, sprinting. I think athletics, track and field.
Mm-hmm.
I then immediately think swimming. Then I think gymnastics. Then I think things like Olympic weightlifting and wrestling and all that judo. So I start thinking martial arts. And the epiphany that hit me was this. I said, man, what you need to do is, this has got to be for kids. It's got to be for adults. It's got to be for the family. It's got to be multi-sport, multi-discipline, large scale. And lo and behold, when I started modeling it that way, it worked. So the epiphany became a business plan. The business plan became a business. The business paid back inside 3 years. It worked. And again, I remind you that the universe works in very strange ways. It worked up until the point where COVID came along. So imagine we went all the way, we traversed 2014 all the way to 2019, 2020. And this thing was working beautifully, had already achieved payback, was a very profitable engine until a couple of things happened inevitably. It's sort of an axiom that at some point, co-founders no longer get along very well together. Unfortunately, that malady struck. And the only good news was that COVID came along, and it was like Alexander the Great cutting the Gordian knot. So it became an impossible to ignore problem. Like lockdown came, we had to close the business, and pretty much, Jeremy, that was the end of the business, right? So coming out of COVID, I'd already reached my decisions. I back to my wife, and I said, you know what? I think the universe is speaking to us here. I was lucky enough to be able to exit the business. So, okay, it didn't make me the fortune that I was expecting initially, but at least it allowed me to have an honorable exit. And I thought, the universe is telling me, get all your stuff in a container, leave Dubai. The fitness industry was great, it was fun. Now it's time to do something else. And that's what happened. So in 2020, I decided I wrapped up the previous business and moved back to Greece. And I kid you not, no sooner had I landed in Greece and enrolled the kids in the best American school that Athens has, I thought, I've got a little bit of money. I had a couple of entrepreneurial ideas. I'm going to start again. Never mind, I was 52 years old. Never give up, roll with the punches and start again. And my phone rang. And that phone call was what became WellFit, because the reputation, I guess, that I had carved out for myself back in the days of Fitra, they resonated with the right people. And I found myself once again fielding a telephone call asking me, some people would like to meet you. Are you in town and do you have a suit? I said, yeah, I'm in town and I have a suit. I met those people. And here we are again now. It's 4 years later. And WellFit is a beautiful little startup that already has 4 flagship clubs and another 4 in the pipeline, growing very, very quickly, pretty much doing what I was doing before with added insights, added clarity, and tweaks on the business model that are completely my own. So one of those, interestingly, and I think we're going to triangulate to this point later on in our discussion today, is this. I could see such a clear move towards longevity, age reversal, and a comprehensive understanding of what it means to be fit and well. Yeah. And what this time, WellFit, there's a reason why it's called WellFit. You could disaggregate that, would you? Wellness and fitness. I aim to be the operator. WellFit is here to connect the dots. You see, the way that you recover and the way that you eat and the way that you train and the way that you live, these are not disconnected, separate pillars. They must be connected. They have to be one cohesive ensemble. And that's what we're here to do. So one of the first things I tell people when they ask, oh, WellFit, it's the gym, right? I say, no, please do not call me a gym. No offense, right? No, we're not a gym. We are, I don't know what to call us. We are a house of fitness and wellness. My youngest member is 3 years old. My oldest member is 74 years old. We're there for kids, for families. I want mom, dad, and the kids to wait for the weekend so they could do nothing else than show up at WellFit, and mom could do jiu-jitsu and dad could do CrossFit and the kids could do swimming, and you get the picture. And that's what we've done. And we're like, sometimes the analogy I use, Jeremy, is we're like a United Nations of all these different tribes of people into their thing. Let me give you some examples. I'll give you some examples of athletes and hobbyists who usually can't stand each other. They usually can't stand each other. Mm-hmm. Triathlete versus CrossFitter, right? Yeah. Thai boxer versus jiu-jitsu guy. Judo guy versus boxing guy. power lifter versus Olympic lifter, bodybuilder, everyone wants to hate the bodybuilders, bodybuilder versus yoga or Pilates, vegan versus carnivore. And I say nonsense. I am the environment where all these people not only get along, they fall in love with each other, they hang out, they form friendships. And you see kids aspiring to be a sprinter, other kids aspiring to become a fighter. And they see that the way that you train and the way that you live and the way you comport yourself, the way you do everything, the way that you network with other people, it's a continuum. And I want to be that continuum. Now, down the line, I want to extend that. So medical services have got to become part and parcel of what we do. I need you to come and do your blood panel with WellFit, because WellFit is not just your gym. WellFit is your trusted advisor for anything that has to do with your fitness, your wellness. Could be anything from your libido to a question, hey, we're getting a bit older, we're losing some muscle mass, and my energy levels aren't what they used to be, and the sexual spark is diminishing between myself and my wife. I don't feel the joie de vivre and the zest for life. What am I going to do? And the answer to that has to be WellFit. So I hope I haven't tired you on my little journey, but you can see that I am where I am purely accidentally as a result of networking with people lifelong. I think the value, the wealth that we build in this life is the people we get to meet. It's part of the reason of my being here today, right? So I meet a guy called Jeremy. It's the people you meet and how you impact them. Everything you do in your life follows you. So here we are, being the guy who was always in a gym somewhere. I ended up being an entrepreneur simply, Jeremy, look how goofy this is. Simply because I found that I was the only guy in the team of entrepreneurs who knew what a gym should smell like, look like, feel like. They had no idea. These guys thought it was a good money-making idea, but I wasn't in for the money, although I'm a capitalist as well. I don't mind making money, but it's got to be done ethically. It's got to be done with love. It's got to be done I'm here to do good, and to do good for myself and my family, but do good generally. So that's my little story about how WellFit came to be.
Wow. Yeah, we've unpacked a lot there in that first riff, and a couple of questions come up that I've been thinking through as you share your amazing story, the serendipitous journey. And you mentioned the CrossFit beginnings, let's say, and the disaggregation. It's interesting, right? Because I think if you do the research into how that organization was founded in the first place, it was a bunch of college guys that didn't want their athlete careers to be over, right? And, I think maybe one of them had background as football player, another had background as gymnast or whatever, but they made this multi-sport thing called CrossFit. And then I think the thing that made it so interesting is they provided the social reinforcement. I don't know if you remember the early online days before there were even gyms that existed. It was like the WOD, the workout of the day, would be posted the night before, and people would be anxiously waiting. What's it going to be? What's it going to be?
That was me.
That was you. Okay. There you go. And, it is interesting to see how much that sport evolved. And it's even interesting to call it a sport because it's really just working out for sport. But I mean, then again, what is any other sport? Like I think about the Canadian pastime hockey. I mean, it started from, batting around frozen horse manure. So, modest beginnings always. And who's to say what will bring people together and unite them. And I think that's a really, interesting, let's just say, perspective that you're providing. And bear with me as I provide probably not the best analogy. And in fact, it might be at a stark opposition, but I think it works because of the intended, let's say, inclusiveness, the family unit aspect of it. And that's McDonald's. Like if you follow the story of the founder, right, with the franchising of McDonald's in the first place, where you have, this visionary who's clearly actually even not the founder. He's not one of the McDonald's brothers. He's the businessman. He has the idea. And the McDonald's restaurant was about the speedy system, right? They built this system to get you a burger in under whatever it was, 1 minute, 2 minutes. And by the way, with good ingredients at the time, right? And it really what the founder noticed is like, wow, like this really brings together families. This brings together busy moms and busy dads. And then you probably remember in the, 70s, 80s, 90s, like McDonald's used to have the fun rooms and the playrooms. And, that was really the vision was, at least if you saw the movie, The Founder, his Michael Keaton played the founder. And he's pitching to the brothers who said no to the franchise because they didn't want to dilute the quality of the product. Anyway, the founder was adamant because he was driving through cities and he sees, churches, flags, courthouses, and he's like, God, arches, churches, flags, and arches. And so when you talk about fitness in the way that you do, and I think about, the global health epidemic. And then you think about, you mentioned COVID, you think about all of the solutions that were advocated around COVID. I mean, we didn't hear really anything about fitness and nutrition, nothing, which to me, I'm, trained, my background's molecular biology, biochemistry. Like I like medicine, I like the techie stuff. I like the future of, where we might go with our molecular tools. But I don't think that they replace the, let's call it nearly 4 billion years of the evolution of this body that is operating pretty synergistically if we just kind of push it in the right direction, let's say anabolically, and that is towards growth and recognizing that each person has, an individual molecular makeup, in their DNA, like you talked about, bringing that aspect, bringing that additional filter into your individual so that while you have all of this, let's say inclusiveness in the organization, this social reinforcement, it seems like actually the thing what I'll say is, as you were talking, it's like, I mean, it kind of is like a church, it does become like, the social cohesion that might give you once a week, and there needs to be ritual around it in order for, the actions to have a positive effect, and it needs to have a positive effect on the community, and members need to benefit. So, the kind of words that were going through my head is like, well, this is like deep fitness, and this is like the church of deep fitness, this WellFit thing that Dimitri's put together, which is
well said, Jeremy. Yeah,
it is pretty amazing. And then I love where you say you're going in terms of, let's just say, the integration of biomarkers, right? Because I've been in this DNA space for about a quarter of a century. If I can't believe it. The first 15 years of my life, I was more academic. So I call myself a recovering academic. I got all the way to a professor of nutrigenomics, and I was like, I look like kind of like you. I was like, oh, there's this entrepreneurial thing. Oh, wow. DNA can tell us things about reproduction and longevity and human performance. Well, how might that affect change? How might that extend human capability, right? And I mentioned to you working with all of the Olympians, and so there's this spread across the diversity of like phenotypes, let's say, that we see, and even like, so the broad spectrum in terms of human optimization, but health, right? Your preset informs everything along the way.
Right.
And we've got this code, like I say, it's been evolving for 4 billion years, which again is activated with the fitness and nutrition. And so it's the better you understand your code, the more likely you're going to achieve your results. And we saw this working with Olympians, for example. We talked about this at the beginning, is, well, knowing where your vulnerabilities are. Like if you lay down different types of collagen, maybe you could avoid those back injuries from deadlifts, for example. And if you are a decathlete, let's say, and you learn, for example, that you have more of an affinity for speed power than you do for endurance, well, then maybe you train strategically for the speed power and the throw events because it's a point system, right? And then for the performance longevity, the body is an amazing thing because it does this thing called the molecular triage. I can't remember the scientist who coined that term. I think it might have been Avery. I don't think it is, but anyway, the idea of molecular triage is, well, your heart needs to beat as a priority, and calcium is required for muscle contraction. And if your calcium stores are low, well, guess what? We got lots of that in our bones. So if we ignore the nutrition for long enough, well, then maybe, hey, is this leading to our increased predisposition to osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, right? And there's thousands of those things that, if left unchecked or ignored, I think that's what we see in the progression of aging. If it's not an acute instance that gets you, it's this kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts. And so the idea at WellFit is like, well, every week you get a chance to reset and center on your code. And, so I'm interested to know actually, one of the things that, I mean, you've answered beautifully, like the genesis of WellFit. Well, the role of let's say business models in terms of, deconstructing or disaggregating the CrossFit business model into what you said, the Olympic events. I was interested to learn more about how, you're applying data potentially now for the individual precision customer experience. Because I know that it sounds to me like you have a roadmap, and you're talking to Fadi. So even if it's only very early in terms of adding that additional kind of filter or lens for people to see themselves in, how do you see, perhaps the integration of biomarkers and wearables, and is there even kind of like a social elements at that level, gamification of keeping your biological age, let's say, less than your chronological age, and that's on the topic of longevity. So what are your thoughts there?
I'll tell you, because I'm not scientifically versed in any of this. So I'm sure it's a blessing to be an modestly educated layperson trying to put myself in the shoes of your average gym member, because I have, at this point, I've got 12,000 members. By this time next year, we should be over the 30,000 mark. My aspiration is within the next 5 years to reach 75 to 100,000 members. That's a lot of people. Now, what percentage of those people would understand something like a BI dashboard that is using factor analysis in order to determine factors, and then is using structural equations modeling or something like logistic regression, multiple regression, in order to build predictive models, in order to understand how all these markers mean something tangible? Like, at the end of the day, you want a predictive model, something that predicts, how am I going to anabolize rather than catabolize? How am I going to be younger than my biomarker age? How am I going to live longer? How am I going to be more vital? How am I going to produce more energy? All these things, it's becoming a sea of too much information. There's so much misinformation, disinformation, overinformation. Even when information is legit, it's becoming, in my opinion, impossible to parse. So if you don't gamify all of this, if you don't some kind of, there's a requirement, Jeremy, I believe, for a genius of simplification, gamification, integrating all these different factoids that loom large. And if you don't put them in like scientists do, if there's no underpinning theoretical framework, if you don't put these together in some kind of model, and if you don't gamify it and serve it to Joe Public in a way that is instantly assimilable, something comprehensible, it's close to useless. So, give you an example. And I'm wearing a Fitbit. What good does it do anyone if they're walking around with any number of wearables and their resting heartbeat is just one variable, and whether they're feeling okay or not is another variable, unrelated, and their blood pressure, maybe they have a blood pressure gadget sitting on their desk like this, and they know what their blood pressure is, but it's completely unrelated. And maybe their doctor ordered a blood panel for them last week, and they saw their lipids, and they saw their complete blood count, and they saw all their estrogen levels, and the estradiol is sky high, free and bound testosterone is really low, and it means nothing to them unless you find a way of integrating that data in a data warehouse, and you could put it together in a model, and you could gamify it. And I could take my member, let's say, Jeremy, and serve you in an automated manner. Like, you could have your dashboard somewhere where, I kid you not, it's like the dashboards that entrepreneurs and business people look at, right? It's telling you what's your top line doing, and what's your bottom line doing, and what are your business ratios doing, right? What's your return on investment, for example? Now, what we're endeavoring to do in WellFit is begin with the basics: data warehousing. we're building data structures and data models such that as all these pieces of data start coming in, could be your in-body device, where I'm getting your body composition, and I'm integrating that with your Fitbit, which is giving me other kinds of information. And I'm going to integrate it down the line with your biomarkers and your blood panel. And all these different things, I have to somehow massage the data using an underlying theoretical framework. And I need to find a way of gamifying it and serving it to you so that without going crazy, you can tell whether what you're doing is working for you or not. So the only answer to the question, am I, Dimitri, eating, supplementing, training, and recovering the right way? No one is going to answer it for you apart from measurable variables, but they need to be measured and interpreted through a predictive model. And that is, I mean, I'm at the risk of rambling here, but I think you see where I'm going. The first step is to become cognizant of the fact that you need to collect data points. The second is to do that in an organized, overarching schema, the data warehouse. And the third is to start looking for, how am I going to make all this comprehensible for the ordinary human being? In order, so that it's not just a deluge, an avalanche of meaningless crap. That you wake up in the morning and you're looking at your Fitbit and it tells you some stuff. And then later on in the day, you look at some other gadgets telling you some other stuff, but it ain't integrated. And it's not telling you whether you should be eating a carnivore diet or a vegan diet or some other combination thereof, if you see what I'm saying. That is the direction I want to take. I wanted to make it our business to get into the predictive modeling and the analytics and data warehousing that are going to be there to do the opposite of confuse people. I want to enlighten people and make them get to grips, understand what's really going on with themselves.
It is interesting where the interesting thing as you're talking, I'm thinking about the data warehousing. Well, the data warehousing has happened. Like for as long as I can remember, being in the entrepreneurial space, you talk to investors and they're interested in companies like Fitbit, well, Facebook, that they're interested in for the data, right? And so the interesting thing, like what you're saying is, well, I do believe that the data exists now to make informed decisions to affect the top line of a business like, say, Facebook, right? But, the thing is, as a Facebook user, you don't have the data dashboard on you that Facebook has on you, for example. What if you did? You might be like, you know what? Every time I check Facebook, I end up going and, having a drink or a bag of chips or, I'm sure those correlations exist because let's face it. I mean, the objective there is to get eyeballs on pages and to get you consuming, products and services. And that in and of itself, let's just say theoretically isn't a bad thing. So it seems to me like it is kind of, gamified or reinforced with, social interaction. So it's like, how do we use the things that we've been calling, negative about social media and kind of reframe them to consumption of, fitness and nutrition products that you can actually measure in your P&L, like you say, which has fantastic EBITDA, right? So you are of this true, growth mindset that
yes.
Yeah.
Very well said, Jeremy. Very well said.
Well, you're preaching to the choir. Like in my very early days, I told you I was a recovering academic at the beginning of our call. I did my postdoc in New York, actually upstate New York in Ithaca, at Cornell University. And the research that I did there is looking at how among other things, looking at how the human infant gut microbiome is colonized over time. Because, the amazing thing is when the baby is born, it doesn't have a microbiome, just like it doesn't have an immune system. And it's really important because actually the microbiome becomes the initial line of defense, let's just say. And so assuming the baby has a vaginal birth, actually its gut microbiome looks more like a vaginal microbiome, looks like the mother's microbiome. Eventually over time, the baby's gut turns into, it's like the vaginal microbiome. Then it's like the skin. It looks more like the skin microbiome because everybody's touching the baby, right?
Right.
And then eventually it turns into a healthy human gut microbiome, provided everything goes according to plan, let's say. But all along the way, there are these different perturbations that happen, right? So the baby, for example, goes from breast milk initially, and there's the colostrum, right? And so that leads to an enrichment of these like bifidobacteria probiotics that, amazingly is in the mother's breast that she's cultivated specific to the environment, right?
Mhm.
It's absolutely amazing. You've got this line of defense that is specific to dealing with the pathogens in the mouth. Go figure. Like I say, 4 billion years of evolution at work there.
Mhm.
You got the colostrum, then you got the regular letdown breast milk, and then you introduce formula, and this is like boom, that explodes the microbiome into chaos, right? And then it settles down again, and then you introduce solid foods, boom, it explodes, and then you get ear infections, so you have the antibiotics, boom, explodes, and so it constantly resets and resettles. Assuming a couple of things. Well, first of all, if you had a vaginal birth, because if you didn't, if you were a C-section birth, the first exposure that you get is whatever in the hospital room. So that's not good, right? And then let's just say, so the vaginal birth, and then what was the other thing? It was right. Assuming you have an operating appendix, because the appendix actually serves as this little reservoir of like your stored probiotics, right? So when you get
Wow.
you get like food poisoning, and if
Mhm.
pathogens take over your gut, it basically explodes. But you've got this little seed there that can reseed your gut. But then if you don't have that, it's like, well, now you're seeing like the commercialization of healthy gut microbiome. So you basically freeze your fecal matter and clean it, and that becomes your own personal healthy microbiome, which I mean, it can be life-saving, because some people go to the hospital who've had appendicitis before, don't have appendix. They get infected with Clostridium difficile, which is rampant in hospitals, these superbugs, and then you never recover your healthy gut bacteria. Anyway,
Man, I had not heard that before. That is fascinating stuff, Jeremy. I did
well,
not know that about the appendix.
yeah. Well, here's the interesting thing about the infant gut microbiome. So I followed this infant. It was like for about 3 years of development. And then we looked at like other infants, and like no two infants were the same in terms of,
Mhm.
their profile, because no two infants are going to be the same in terms of what they encountered in their environment. Like,
Mhm.
what formula they use, what ear infection they got, what vaccinations they got, what antibiotics they took. It's all, but the thing that is common is the resilient nature of the gut microbiome. So it has this robust diversity there.
Right.
So you can measure things broadly. So these come back to the factor analysis, the metrics, the roll-up scores that actually mean something.
Right.
Is like, well, what's the diversity of players in the gut microbiome? What's the evenness, of
Mhm.
those different players? For example, what's the saturation point? How much is too much? How little is too little? And then what different perturbations, i.e., well, food poisons or probiotics, can push you in the right direction. And so then you're getting actually very objective about specific things that you can move the gut to a healthy place, which, by the way, is no it's no simple thing, and it's not without drastic consequences, because we have the gut brain axis, we have the gut body weight axis. Like, they've done experiments where if you take microbiome from obese people and put them in lean people, they become obese, and vice versa. So there's this amazing physiology that's induced or educed by our passengers, let's say. And that's
Right.
certainly something to measure, but it wasn't to add another variable to measure. It's just simply to say that with all this chaos, there actually is an order to it. And so when I
Mhm.
think about making things simple for the consumer, like, I've spent years looking at my own
Right.
dashboards as well, trying to think about what are the simple things that can help people get and stay in that growth mindset. And
Yep.
I've got a few roll up metrics that seem to be performing really well, that at a separate time I'd love to share with you, and you
Sure.
see if there's a simple synergy, because I do believe it has to be simple. And I'm not talking about easy. Simple is different than easy. I'm talking about, the simple on the far side of complexity, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, well, so what you're saying is amazing in terms of the data, and I'm just, you probably kind of indirectly answered this, but there's a lot of existing. Well, I'm going to answer this by asking the question, because you've already said this. So there are with so many gym chains out there, why hasn't anybody done this? And I think the answer is because we're not a gym chain. So from your perspective,
Yep.
so then I ask, well, why is it going to work for whatever it is that you're doing? Why do you think this level is going to work? And I already know why it's so important, because if you can unify the fitness, health, behavioral analysis with the data analytics, well, now you've all of a sudden become a data company, and you can add a zero to your valuation because of the power and the evergreen nature of the information that you have. You become like Facebook. Yeah. So
Exactly right.
So how do you think that your difference will make this possible? Yeah.
Well, it's easy to become presumptuous here because, and I don't want to presume.
Yeah.
This is based on. It's not based on research. It's based on an instinct, Jeremy. Something is telling me. I've got this instinctive belief that must go in this direction, if nothing else, because I've spent when you spend your life training, whether like yourself, you spent, and you've done it at a competitive cutting edge as a track athlete. But for me, I'm not a genetic wonder. I've had to fight for every single gram of muscle I've ever gained, and I've had to work even harder for every gram of fat I've ever lost. And I'm not a natural athlete. I've had to work. So I'm a lay guy. No God-given talents or gifts or anything here. Just an ordinary guy who's found out how to be extraordinary through hard work. And in doing this, I see people perpetually confused. They're perpetually confused. I'm tired of the confused. I want to help these people. Let me give you an example. When you spend, look, I'm blessed with the following because it's my favorite thing in the world. It's not working for me. I live in a gym. I'm inside some form of training area every single day. I spend 12, 14, 16 hours a day in them, right? Whether it's the dojo or it's the functional training CrossFit area or it's inside the gym with the meatheads. I'm watching ordinary people day in, day out train. And you see all categories. Let me give you some typical categories. The endlessly catabolic who cannot understand how to become anabolic. So this is women, I'm afraid, are particularly prone to this, right? So you'll see some ladies doing 3 studio classes in a row. Like they'll be doing some kind of circuit class, gasping for breath. Then they're going to drag themselves into some kind of HIIT studio and do another 45 minutes of high intensity something. And then they might drag themselves for a 3rd session. I'm not exaggerating. This is for real. And they'll go into a spin class and do another 45 minutes of spinning. And they will remain skinny fat for their entire 12 or 24-month membership. You'll see them every day and you'll recognize them. And they are skinny fat. They've got no muscle mass and they're all wobbly. And if you were to measure their body fat, it'll be in the high 20s, right? And for the life of them, they can't figure out, why am I not becoming a lean, mean, a sexy machine here? And they can't understand catabolism versus anabolism. Same thing, if you were to look at your typical executive white collar triathlete, right? Look at these guys, like in any company around the world. If they're not playing golf, the guys are doing triathlon. It's a thing. Anecdotally, like I don't have any research behind this, but I'm telling you, if you looked at most of these guys doing triathlon, they don't even look like they go to the gym. They don't look fit. As a matter of fact, if they're training for something like the Ironman, they look bedraggled. They look tired. They look beaten up. They don't even know. They don't measure their they don't go to get their endocrinologist to measure their estradiol and their testosterone levels. If they did, they would discover that they're hypogonadic. They've got no testosterone. They've crashed out. They're swimming in cortisol. They're swimming in estradiol. They've got no testosterone. They look ill, but they're very fit by any other kind of marker. Like if you look at their VO2, these guys are going to have a VO2 max above 80, so what? So I guess what I'm trying to say, I see so much confusion. People who do not know how to eat. They want to get lean, they don't know how to get lean. They want to get buff, they don't know how to get buff. They want to, you see guys who are trying to master a simple body weight movement. They're trying to do more pull-ups. I'm not talking about pulling a 500-pound deadlift here. I'm talking about doing 10 decent pull-ups. And you'll see guys who just can't manage to do it. It's not because it's beyond them. It's because they haven't figured it out. They haven't hacked it. No one's shown them how to do it. And I don't want WellFit to continue being that kind of fitness operator where you've got bedraggled people walking around, or people who are not getting stronger. They're not getting leaner. They're not getting more muscular. They're not feeling better. They're not looking sexier, or whatever it is that their objective is. They're not achieving it. I consider it my mission to hold their hand until they achieve it. I've got to help them. It's a matter of knowledge. Like you're doing something wrong. Like you're not recovering, or you're not eating, or you're not supplementing, or something. Or the training protocol you're on just isn't working. Let's do something else. You see where I'm going with this, Jeremy? It's so pervasive. It's absolutely everywhere. If you ask me to guess, Dimitri, just give us a number. I'd say that 80% of the gym members I've ever seen in my lifetime are in this category. And by the way, it was even worse back in the day when I was a CrossFitter. Because CrossFit did something ingenious. You touched on it before. CrossFit, it sort of pressed this competitiveness button that all human beings appear to have, So my wife, for example, when she got into CrossFit, she wasn't concerned about how well she was moving. Like, she wasn't concerned whether her hang power clean and her double unders were being done well. You know what she was worried about? Beating the other women of her own age group in the class. So all these guys doing the WOD, they don't give a shit about how they're moving, right? They just want to beat everyone else. And we stopped doing CrossFit at some point in my gyms and started doing our own training protocol because I couldn't stand the visual impact of watching a class of 25 people, ordinary people, doing a WOD, at the end of a tiring day. And it was just a sea of bad movement. Like, these were not people who were moving well. They were moving spastically and spasmodically, and it just bad movement because they wanted to beat the clock. And it's another example of incorrect protocol because people have incorrect cues. Now, the way I see it, our job is not just to make money by selling memberships. Our job is to help people feel better, move better. And I think one of the things we might be discussing further on in our discussion is it's the difference between function and aesthetics. And it's one of the good things that I believe that CrossFit brought to the table was making people aware of, what is it that you can do? Like there was a time I remember, maybe 10 years ago, women, it was a rare thing to see a woman doing a pull-up. Yeah, look at them now. Now your typical serious female CrossFit athlete is a beast. She's doing bar muscle-ups, right? She's repping out bar muscle-ups and doing handstand walks and doing incredible stuff. Whereas just a decade ago, most women, they thought that if you just look at a barbell, you're going to turn into a silverback gorilla. You're going to grow hairier and stuff. You look like a bodybuilder. And roll forward a few years and you see beautiful things, like you see women working on their posterior chain. And they know that you got to do your Romanian deadlifts, and you got to squat. So I've rambled a bit there, but I think you get the flavor of my answer and see the angle that I'm coming at.
100%. And it makes me think of two things, or two people, I should say, who are, great friends and mentors, if you will. So on the skinny fat odyssey of workouts, who comes to mind is Dan Paff, who's an 11-time Olympic coach, 11-time Olympic sprint coach. And he worked with other speed power athletes as well, worked with a lot of multi-athletes, pole vaulters, decathletes. And, one of his big sayings was, the menu is not the meal. Right? You don't have to eat everything on the menu, and you certainly and then so this was part of that study that I was doing with you, what I told you about with Athletigen, with this track and field organization based in Phoenix. We worked with them for a couple of years leading up to the 2016 Olympic Games, and part of what they did, which actually might be an business model for you to consider, is they were very open and transparent with all their high performance methodologies. So they would, most coaches would, kind of hide their differentiating practices and training
Right.
methodologies. No, Alta's invited the world in and said, here's how we do it. Right. And so you would get all these, incredible coaches from all over the world. And, they'd be going to the master like Dan Paff and asking, well, should we do deadlifts and should we do bench press and how many reps? And Dan's answer was always, it depends. It really depends on like, and so really what I think he was getting at is we oftentimes, so this actually doubles for business, right? So KPIs, you've got key performance indicators and you've got key performance inhibitors. And if you focus on those things as the outcomes, you get a very different result. So take, for example, like in boxing, it's like, well, I have to be a certain weight, I have to achieve a certain fight weight. And it's like, well, how you achieve that is really important. So, say for example, you're, I don't know, 3 months out from your fight, and then, you cut down to your fight weight right away and you're like, okay, I'm ready. And then in your mind, you're like, well, that's the KPI. And so you're now going on this false confidence or false achievement that actually you're ready to fight when you haven't done anything in terms of develop your skill set. You haven't done anything in terms of develop your physiology or your strategy. You've done nothing in terms of examine your opponent to develop your own, counter strategy. So KPIs versus, key. So KPIs versus objectives. Well, like it's the John Doerr method, right? It's like objectives and key results. Well, the key results are the things that move you down the field and may tell you if you're going in the right direction or not, but they're not the only thing. There's a bigger picture there. And then, so the second person that came to mind was, you probably know him, Dr. Kelly Starrett. He's the inventor of the mobility wad, now rebranded. What's it called? The Ready State. Actually, I have his book on my shelf over there, The Supple Leopard, and there's another one that he has out.
Yep, that's a great book.
Yeah. So him and his wife Juliet, she was a lawyer turned CrossFit gym owner, turned CrossFit Games competitor, by the way. But yeah, Kelly was, he was one of the first CrossFit gym owners, San Francisco CrossFit. And, he was training as a doctor of athletic therapy. And then one of the things that, kind of compelled him to start the mobility wad was like, I can't be a doctor of athletic therapy and, see all these injuries around me because people are focused on the wrong thing, that is beating my training partner, just like more gym members are like, okay, well, it comes down to how many classes I go to a week and how hard I can get my heart rate. And it's like, no, man, it's like, we have to look at the strategic. So one of the things I learned working with Altas, that's the Altas world, the track and field group is, and you've learned this organically, I think, in your own travels as an athlete is, growth and adaptation is the result of a strategic application of an overreaching stress, right? So a little bit out of reach, but not to the point that it breaks you, because there's, this philosophy where it's like, you come to the end of the workout, it was really, really hard. It was really challenging for its purpose. And then if you're asked, well, could you do it again? Like right now, the right answer should be, yes, I could. I'm not broken, beyond belief, right? It would be hard because I've never done what I've just done, but I could do it. But then of course you don't do it because you need the time to adapt. And it was actually I remember a bit from Charlie Francis's book, Speed Trap with Ben Johnson. Now, take all the drugs out of the equation. There were some really interesting training philosophies there in terms of how to train sprinting, because that's a real tough one. Like that's about the posterior chain activation. That's about, the central nervous system. That the central nervous system maximization. That's Foddy that's calling now. I'll connect with him later. Yeah. So there's the neural drive that you're basically depleting, and training your ATP-PC system versus your anaerobic versus your aerobic, very different thing. And so Charlie would have Ben Johnson run these workouts, whereas like say, 4 times 3 times 60 meters is the workout, let's say. And keep in mind, he'd have Ben Johnson warm up. He'd use like complex training. Have him like warm up with 500-pound squats, right?
Yeah.
Really,
I've read his numbers. I think he had
Yeah.
him benching 500 pounds at some point. Absolute beast of a
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. So anyway, he in
Mm.
the second set of 60 meters, he breaks the world record of the 60 meters. And so Charlie France like, okay, like we're done. That's it. Like go home, myelinate, eat some carbohydrates, like rest for like 3 weeks. You just broke the world record. So there is that I think there is that opportunity to, I think, educate people right at the intake of
Yes.
the method. Yeah. Right. Why are you doing this? Because there is a bigger why, and it usually is really quite something existential. When you ask why 5 times, you'll get to something, right? Like something like, well, it's the meaning of my life, right? Or to be there for my children, or
What a
to
good
honor.
question. It very much depends, though, Jeremy, who's asking. So check this out.
Yeah.
If my venture capital backers ask me why, I'm going to answer because we're going to make a lot of money.
Well, sure. Yeah.
Which is true. If my
Yes.
wife asks me why, I'll say the truth because I love doing this. That's how
Yes.
I'm wired.
Yeah.
If my kids ask me, I'll tell them another truth. All these things are true. I'll
Yeah.
say because I want this to be my legacy. I want to do some good. When we're gone, what's the most we can hope for? That someone somewhere has something good to say about us, right? Someone, that's all we want. We want to do some good while we're here. So yeah, I'm not Mother Teresa, but I'd like to think that I've done some good. I love doing this shit. I love it anyway. I can't tell you why. Like I find sometimes I've had to answer friends or the love of my life, my wife asking me, man, why'd you just spend half an hour talking to this guy who approached you in the gym? You're wasting half an hour. Because, I'll be approached by someone who asks me something. Hey, dude, how'd you get lean, right? I don't disengage politely and say, sorry, I got to be somewhere. I'll tell you what, Jeremy, I swear. I'll sit there and tell the guy what I know works on me, for example. And why do I do this? I couldn't tell you. It's just, I'm compelled to spread the love. And I'm being absolutely genuine here.
Yeah.
I love this stuff. It's not just business. So one element of truth is no one else is doing it. We're going to do it. We're going to make money doing it. That's one answer. Another one is because it's how I'm wired. And that's the way I am. And I like doing it. And I want my top employees, I want to lead by example. I want to be an ambassador of practicing what I preach. I can't be in the fitness industry and not be fit, and I can't be pretending to do it. If you're selling cars, man, I hope you like cars, And if you've got restaurants, I really hope you like food. You better be a foodie because it'll make for you, A, being happier, and B, being a better restaurateur. That's what I'm thinking. So I think that answers the question as honestly as I could put it. This is not just a job. This is what I do. This is how I'm wired anyway. It's also true, I think there's an angle for being unique and having barriers to entry that are not easy to overcome if you're trying to compete against me. Basically, I don't want to be competed against. I want to be a trailblazing pioneer of connecting the dots for people and making it more straightforward to lead what should be available to everyone, man. I mean, you said before, and this knocks me out a little bit. What if obese people are battling against a gut biome that's got it in for them? And the rest of us ignoramuses are walking around thinking, they just eat too much. They eat too much and they don't train enough and they're a bunch of lazy asses and blah, blah, that's just wrong. That's just wrong. It's just an ignorant statement to make. And I guess I'm anti-ignorance. We're here to do good and make money doing it. No objection to that bit. But I think that's where I'm coming at this from. I want to be different in doing good, make money by doing
I love it. I love it. Well, I'll tell you what, to me, it sounds like no matter where you slice it, no matter who's asking me why, it all rolls up into this, call it whatever we will, this WellFit, church of deep fitness, slice of heaven on earth. And, I love that you've taken the time to share your passion, your vision with me today. I'd love to have you back on to talk about how this vision evolves. Actually, I've got a ton of ideas that we definitely should connect on afterwards. But for now, Dr. Dimitri Koutsoubakis, thank you so much for sharing time with me on your Saturday. This has been enlightening, and it's been an honor to have you on the show. Thank you, sir.
Jeremy, I thank you in turn. It's been lovely meeting you. Anytime, you know where to reach me. So it's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. Have a great remainder to your day, and we'll see each other, no doubt, down the line. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the DNA of Things. I hope you enjoyed this enlightening conversation with Dr. Dimitri Koutsoubakis. Today, we explore the origins and mission of WellFit, the integration of fitness and wellness, and the crucial role of data in personalizing health journeys. Dr. Koutsoubakis' extensive experience from his work with Lenovo and Microsoft to his academic roles and leadership at WellFit highlights the importance of blending business acumen with a passion for fitness. Dr. Koutsoubakis' insights on transforming confusion into clarity and helping people achieve their fitness goals are truly inspiring. His work with prominent figures and organizations underscores the innovative approaches WellFit is taking to redefine fitness and wellness. I hope you gained valuable knowledge that will positively impact your life and fitness journey. And hey, who knows, perhaps you'll take a fitness retreat to Dubai and check out WellFit for yourself. Remember, understanding your body's unique needs and optimizing your health can lead to a longer, more vibrant life. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with your friends and family. Let's spread the love and empower others to unlock their potential. Until next time, stay curious and keep pushing the boundaries of fitness and wellness to achieve, to realize your human capability.